Shalom, everyone, and welcome to the special lecture, which we're going to hear in just a moment with Rabbi Aharon Schmidt. It is a great honor that we're able to do these monthly lectures. After a successful year last year of starting monthly lectures, this year we've done it in a little bit of a different style, that we're going to be having different speakers speak about different subjects the first Tuesday of every secular month. So that's tonight. This is the second in the series of monthly lectures. And that connects to the regular Tuesday night class, which is also over here every Tuesday night in Chassidut at 7:30, both right here in our Zoom room and also on Facebook Live. The idea of adult education is a great honor for us, that we should be able to bring quality Torah learning for so many people. And I want to thank Rabbi Levi Diamond, who is in charge of adult education right over here at Chabad of Rechavia, for arranging this special lecture and the other special lectures. Very soon, Rabbi Diamond is going to be starting a JLI class in Hebrew, and then in a few months, a JLI class in English. These are high-level adult education with tens of thousands of students around the world in different Chabad houses around the world. And it is a great honor that right here in Yerushalayim, we should be able to also bring you the best of the best. We are now in the month of Cheshvan, and the month of Cheshvan is sort of a boring month. We're coming from a very busy month as far as Chagim, which that is the month of Tishrei, and the month of Tishrei, we're all on a high, whether we're talking about Teshuvah or crowning Hashem as being the king, or my best mitzvah, Simcha. We're on a high, Sukkot, Simchas Torah. That's like the high of the year. And then we dive down into the next month of Cheshvan. So we sort of need to have some kind of bridge between being on a high and going back to our regular day-to-day matters. That the day-to-day matters should be different than they were before Tishrei, before the high, and the high should be continued as much as possible throughout the rest of the year. In a great way, can be connected to a marriage. Just like in any relationship, especially in marriage, there are times that the couple is on a high, both spiritually, emotionally, physically, and then there are times, naturally speaking, which it's not so much on a high, and we need to nurture, we need to invest in our energy, that we should bridge the gap between being on a high and sometimes not such on a high, and we should be able to bring that. We should continue this special relationship also in challenging times. Also, I think that when we say V'Yaakov halach l'darko, Yaakov went on to his way, and we try to bridge between the high of Tishrei and the regular day-to-day of Cheshvan, I think that when we get back to our day-to-day lives in our relationships, whether in our own marriages or hopefully marriages to come, we need to invest much more in as we come to the regular quote unquote day-to-day life. And so therefore it is an honor for us to introduce Rabbi, I'm giving you a doctor, I'm crowning you with the name Dr. Aharon Schmidt, who is a great friend and a Torah scholar, a marriage counselor, and I think above all, the editor of the very popular Jewish, the Weekly Jewish, the weekly Parsha newsletter in English, and also has a special column over there, a very popular column, very humbly placed in the back of the back of page 4. But I think many people look there first. And Rabbi Schmidt is going to be talking about respecting your spouse, and I like the word "and yourself." And Bezrat Hashem, hopefully through listening to Rabbi Schmidt, we're going to be able to enhance our own relationships in our own marriages, hopefully shidduchim, to be able to make other shidduchim. And if you have questions, please send them to me by WhatsApp or by email. And after Rabbi Schmidt's presentation, we're going to give words of closing, and then we'll open up the opportunity to be able to present Rabbi Schmidt with questions and answers because of the technical Zoom situation. So it might be a little more difficult for you to ask the questions personally. In order to keep the order, please, you can also post questions in the comments on Facebook on our Facebook page, Chabad of Rechavia, and also in the comments in Zoom. Without any further ado, I want to introduce Rabbi Aharon Schmidt. Please inspire us. Shalom, shalom, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rabbi Goldberg.
You're welcome.
So we have a lot to cover, so we'll just jump in. I'd like to start with a story. It's a story with Rabbi Nehemiah Wilhelm, who is the Shaliach in Bangkok, Thailand. So there was a young man by the name of Shlomi. Shlomi had grown up in a religious home, but around the age of 16, he decided to move away from Torah and mitzvahs. Now, he went further and further away to the point he actually became a volunteer in an organization that was against religion. Now, after the army, he took a trip to the Far East, and he found himself in Thailand, and he found himself in Bangkok. He came into the Beit Chabad, into the Chabad house, and started to meet people, talk to people, and so forth. It was around the same time that they were about to go on a seminar into nature for about 4 days. Rabbi Wilhelm would take about maybe 20 or so travelers, and they would spend 4 days discussing Judaism, asking questions, and so forth. So somebody asked Shlomi if he would like to come. And perhaps because of the environment he was in, he agreed to come. So he went on this seminar, and he was very moved by everything he was hearing. It was apparent that the answers were really going into him in a really profound way. So after the seminar, after he got back to Bangkok, he decided to put on tefillin, keep Shabbos, and slowly he came Shomer Torah and mitzvahs again. Now, one day there was an Oneg Shabbos, and Rabbi Wilhelm was telling the famous story that many of you have probably heard, that there was a woman waiting in line to get $1 from the Rebbe. And she waited for a number of hours. When she finally got to the front of the line, she said to the Rebbe, "Rebbe, I've been standing for 2 hours, and my legs are so sore and hurting. You've been standing for many, many hours, and you're older than me. How do you do it?" And so the Rebbe gave the famous answer, "When you're counting diamonds, you don't get tired." So after Rabbi Wilhelm told this story, Shlomi stood up. He said, "I want to talk about my past." So he said, "My parents tried everything they could. They took me to this rabbi, this personality, but nothing worked. Nothing touched me and got me to return to the path of Torah and mitzvah." So I asked myself, what is it about here that's opened me up and got me to return to the path? So this story summarizes it. This story, because when you're treated respectfully, when you're treated like you're important, when you're treated like you're valued, when you're accepted, when you're treated like a diamond, then you're willing to open up. But when you're just treated like another number, another figure, another person, it's a whole different story. So that's kind of the preface to what we're going to talk about today, acceptance. What is acceptance? There's a lot of different ways you could look at acceptance. It could be that accepting the good in the other person, focusing on the good. It could be perhaps making a separation between the person and their actions, accepting their higher self, and realizing that their actions are not them. It could be perhaps accepting the whole person, their good and their bad together. But what is it really exactly? What is acceptance, and how does it apply to our lives and to our marriage life? So I want to tell another story too, because this story also helps to bring the point home. There's a famous story with the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, Rabbi Shneur Zalman, that he was in a certain town, and I won't go into all the details of the story. We'll kind of get to the main point of the story. But the Kitzer, there was a young man who was about to get married, and he had been taken by the local police and held by ransom because they knew, given he was very important to the Jewish community, they'd be willing to pay a high amount of money to get him out of jail. So the Alter Rebbe was in this town and he heard about this situation, and he wanted to try and raise money to get this chassan, this young man, out of jail. So he asked the community leaders to put together a list of everybody in the town. So they put together a list. But there was one person that they left off the list, and the Alter Rebbe was aware of it. He said, what about this person? And they said, no. There's no point putting him on the list. It's true he has money, but he's a miser. He separated himself from the Jewish community, and he never gives anything to the Jewish community. So there's no point in even reaching out to him. The Alter Rebbe said, listen, put him on the list and follow me and just do what I say. I said, okay. So the Alter Rebbe wanted to go to his house. So he lived in a mansion high up on the hill. So they walked up the hill to the mansion, and when they got there, they could see it was very dilapidated. It hadn't been kept up. It was very dusty. The Alter Rebbe knocked on the door with the big doorknob, and they heard noise inside, someone coming to the door. The door creaked open, and there was a man there. He said, what do you want? And the Alter Rebbe explained the whole story about what was taking place and how this person, they needed a large amount of money, 20,000 rubles, to get this chassan out of jail. And so the man responded, I would love to help. I really want to help. He went back into his house. The dust was flying, noise, this and that, papers. He heard a big chest creaking open and closing. And when the man came back, he opened his hand. He had one dusty, beat-up penny. So the community leaders that were with the Alter Rebbe, they snickered to themselves. They said, we knew this was going to happen. But the Alter Rebbe said, thank you very much. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for your giving. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Hashem should bless you. And they went to leave. And as they're leaving, the man calls again, wait, I want to help more. So they came back. And again, the same thing again repeats itself. The dust, the papers, the creaky chest opening, closing. And he comes back and he gives him another old beat-up penny. And the community leaders are thinking to themselves, he's really making a fool out of us. He's really, playing with us. But the Alter Rebbe again says, thank you so much. Thank you. We appreciate it. It's wonderful. Hashem should bless you. Thank you so much. And this continues to repeat itself. The man decides to give a bit more money, gives a ruble, he gives 10 rubles, he gives 20 rubles, 1,000 rubles, so finally he gives the whole sum of 20,000 rubles. So later, they're talking later that evening, and they say to the Alter Rebbe, what happened? What took place? What changed in the man, in the miser? So the Alter Rebbe said to them, he always wanted to give, but nobody would ever receive what he wanted to give. They had their expectations of what he should give, and so they would never receive it. But once somebody was able to receive what he was capable of giving from his level, that opened him up to be able to give more. So when we look at that story, there's a few ways to look at it. We can look at it that the Alter Rebbe was focused on his good, saying thank you, praising the good, which inspired him to want to give more. Or we can look at it in a slightly different way. We can look at it that the Alter Rebbe accepted him where he was holding. He put aside the expectations of where he thinks or how much money he should be giving, and just accepted where the man was at that moment. And that acceptance, that valuing, that validating, enabled the man to be able to give more. So there's Rabbi Chaim Faro. He's one of the shluchim here in Ramat Beit Shemesh. He was in Manchester for many years, about 40 years. And on, I think, his first yichidus with the Rebbe, his first personal audience with the Rebbe, so he had a number of philosophical hashkafa questions. And the Rebbe told Rabbi Faro that all the questions for Western philosophy, the conflicts, the seeming conflicts between Western philosophy and Torah can be found in Tanya and Likutei Torah, Torah Or. Within those texts, all the answers can be found. So if you look in this week, the Chassidish Parsha in Torah or in Vayera, there's something very interesting the Alter Rebbe says. The Alter Rebbe says that everything in the world can be looked at either positively or negatively. In other words, the thing itself doesn't change. It's not that the thing changes and now we look at it positively, or the thing changes and now we look at it negatively. But the Alter Rebbe says everything in the world can be viewed either positively or negatively. And he gives the example. In the end of Parshas Bereishis, Hashem says, V'chol yetzer machshavos libo v'akra kol hayom. All the thoughts, all the desires of man are just bad all the time, the whole day. And therefore Hashem says, I'm going to wipe out every living being from the face of the earth. However, in Parshas Noach, when they come out of the Teva, of the ark, it's almost the exact same lashon, that all of man's thoughts are bad from his birth, and therefore I'm not going to wipe out living beings again. I'm not going to. So what changed? It was the same thing, the same words. In Bereishis, it was looked at from, I will wipe out all living beings, from negative. But in Noach, it was first a positive. And the Alter Rebbe explains that the first time it aroused the attribute of din, of judgment, kavura. But the second time was aroused the attribute of chesed, of kindness. Basically, it comes down to how a person wants to look at a situation. What eyes do they want to see a certain situation? Do they want to see it through an aspect of judgment, of criticism, of din? Or do they want to see it through acceptance, through kindness, through chesed? The amazing thing of this example is the situation didn't change. The situation was the same. The wording was the same, in other words. The wording was the same, but the reaction was different. It's like three people walking down the street. They're walking on their way to work. And a car comes by and splashes muddy water on the three people. One guy gets upset. One guy doesn't react. And one guy says, Gam zu v'toiva, even this is for the good. So what's the difference? The same thing happened, because it all depends how a person chooses to engage the world, to engage life, how he decides to engage life. Now, there's three different approaches that we see a lot in terms of social relationships, life, but also in terms of marriage counseling, marriage, and so forth. But these approaches are intertwined, interrelated, but also different. The first approach you hear a lot is more of a cognitive therapy approach. And that is focusing on the good. Focus on the good in the person. See their good. Make that the main thing you see. Almost as if it's kind of like tunnel vision. Almost like tunnel vision. You just see the good of your spouse. The issue, to a certain extent, is that this implies that there is bad, but you're choosing to ignore it. You're choosing to ignore the bad and focus on the good. The truth is there is navoda in this. There is navoda. It's the voda of light. Light banishes darkness. That by increasing the light, the darkness will go away. Not that the person will change, but the person viewing will no longer focus on the bad. Like for instance, in Mitzrayim, we had the plague of blood before the plague of frogs. That explains why was that? Because blood is the idea of the heat, the excitement. It's the idea of aseh tov, of doing good. Whereas frogs are cold. It's the idea of sumara, refraining from bad. Normally, refraining from bad comes before doing good. But the Rebbe explains that there is a certain voda where doing positive activities comes before refraining from negative activities. And that can be the idea of seeing the good. However, as I said, the one maybe issue to deal with is that the person's ignoring the bad. Hopefully the bad will just go away. But there is a bad there the person's not paying attention to. The second level is, as we mentioned at the beginning, is separating the person from their actions. Okay, fine. This works very well with teenagers and parenting. Fine. That person did something that wasn't right. But it doesn't mean they're a bad person. It doesn't mean that I'm going to call them names and label them as bad. Those are their actions. That they inside are good. They're a good person. And I want to look at them with Ayin Tovah. I want to look at them from that place of their perfection. I want to make that separation between them and their actions. It's like chapter Lamed Beis in Tanya, where the Alter Rebbe says, what if a person sins? What if he does bad? You know, how are you supposed to look at that person? And the Alter Rebbe says, fine, you dislike the bad, but the person, their nefesh elokis, that you love. And in fact, you even have compassion for the fact their nefesh elokis is trapped in this body with this Yetzer Hara, and that arouses your love even more. So it's also the idea of making that separation, So too, in the Maimer Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi Li in Likutei Torah, actually the Rebbe's Maimer about this Maimer, the Rebbe talks about the idea that in Elul, we have the 13 attributes of mercy, that they shine into a person and they arouse him to want to do tshuva. But what about the person that's a sinner? What about the person that's in the desert? What about him? So the Rebbe explains that this revelation of godliness still shines into that person that's even in the desert, that person that's not doing what they're supposed to be doing, because their inner self is good. Their inner self is a kli for Hashem's revelation. But again, you're separating the person from their actions. So in a sense, it's good, it's important. You're looking at the person as perfect, but what about their actions? Their actions are still not really being dealt with. There's a third approach, and this approach is more the focus of what we're speaking about this evening, is acceptance. Accepting the person. In other words, you acknowledge the fact that the person isn't perfect, that they do have things about them that need to be fixed. But that is part of their journey. That's part of the process. That's part and parcel of their perfection. That we are all in a journey. Hashem gives us the years of our life to reach completion, to get to shleimus, to get to, so to speak, perfection. But in the middle of our journey, we're not there yet. We're exactly where we're supposed to be. So when we look at somebody who isn't perfect, that makes mistakes, that does things that bother us, it's not that we're avoiding looking at those things, but we say, fine, okay, I accept it. The person's in the middle of their journey. They're an unfinished project. When I come into a kitchen that's being remodeled, and it's in the middle of being remodeled, it's all torn apart, everything half built, I don't say, ugh, look at this kitchen. You know, it doesn't look nice. I realize that the kitchen is in the process of being built. So to a person, they're in the process of change, a process of growth. Oftentimes in marriage, couples will get very frustrated with the actions of their spouse. Think of this example, for instance. A woman decides she wants to go, a wife decides she wants to go to the beach with her friends. And her day she can go as Erev Shabbos. So she arranges with her husband that the husband will be with the kids, watch the kids, and she'll get home, 3 or 4 hours before Shabbos, and they work out that then she'll prepare Shabbos. But what happens? She gets home an hour before Shabbos. And the husband is very frustrated by the situation. And Shabbos comes in, everything is really just rushed, the balagan, and so forth. And inside the husband's thinking, why did she have to come home so late? Why couldn't she have come home earlier? We agreed she was going to come home earlier. It shows a lack of respect, a lack of caring. Why did she do this? So there's a lot of different ways a person can look at that situation. But one way of looking at the situation is just accepting that we're all in the process of growth, that we're not perfect, and this is normal. The fact that we make mistakes is part and parcel of our perfection. Now, where do we see this in the Torah? Where can we see this concept in the Torah of seeing the other person as perfect, even though they might make mistakes? So in Kapitel Tzadik, the 90th Psalm, there's a verse that says, Yemesh Nosenu Bahem Shivim Shana V'im V'Gevrois Shmoinim Shana. The days of our years, because of them, are 70 years, and if we merit increase, 80 years. But the question is, if you look at that pasuk, I'll read again, Yemesh Nosenu, the days of our years, Bahem, because of them, are 70. And if we really are merit, 80 years. But why Bahem? Why because of them? Bahem seems it's not necessary. We could have just said the days of our 70, and if you merit 80. Why Bahem? So it's explained that Bahem is the same letters practically as the word behema, which is animal. That inside of every Jew, a Jew has a godly soul and an animal soul. The godly soul comes down from Gan Eden as enclosed in the body, but the godly soul doesn't need a tikkun. The godly soul doesn't come down because it needs to be fixed. The godly soul comes down to refine the animal soul and his portion in the world. That's the job of the godly soul. So therefore, in the pasuk, Yemesh Noseinu Bahem, the days of our years are 70 and 80. Bahem is hinting the idea that our job during these years is to refine our animal soul. Hashem doesn't expect that we're going to be perfect. He expects we're on a journey. That's a process. There's a story of Rabbi Chaim Shalom Deitch. Rabbi Deitch was the Rosh Kollel of the Tzemach Tzedek in the Old City of Yerushalayim. Now, when he was young, there was one time that there was somebody in the neighborhood, and he was looking for a place to eat for Shabbos lunch. And he encountered somebody, and the person brought the person he encountered brought this person to Rav Deitch's house. So Rav Deitch was young at the time, so it was his father's house. So the guest that came over didn't really speak any Hebrew. He spoke English, and Rav Deitch's father also didn't speak English. He spoke Hebrew and Yiddish. So it was very hard for them to communicate. Rav Deitch's father gave him so much chesed, so much kindness, and that spoke more words than actually words would have spoken. At the end of the meal, they walked out, and he explained, I guess, in broken Hebrew English somehow, that he grew up in a religious home. But his father was so strict with him and would yell at him about his Yiddishkeit that it made him hate Yiddishkeit. To the point he wanted nothing to do with it, and he totally went away from it. But he said, the way you treat me today with such acceptance and such love, that's made me open my heart to want to reconsider Yiddishkeit again. There's another story too of Rav Notik. Rav Notik, he just passed away. If I'm not mistaken, Zion Cheshvan. He was a very special mashpia who lived in Yerushalayim. And it was very shocking he passed away. But there's a story that hopefully could serve as a liyas neshama for him, that it was Shabbos day, and it was during the time when there's a lot of conflict around Bar Ilan Street with people wanting people not to drive on Shabbos and people dafka driving on Shabbos. There was a lot of conflict there. He was walking home from shul as a good Chabadnik does in the afternoon, and he saw someone driving down the street, and the person stopped at the traffic light, and so he said to him, he said, Shabbat Shalom. And the person was in his car, and he looked at him like, why are you saying to me Shabbat Shalom? I'm in my car, I'm driving, don't you see? And he said again, Shabbat Shalom. And he said, don't you see I'm driving a car? And Rav Notik said to him, it's your Shabbos, just like it's my Shabbos. And as the person with the light turned green is about to drive away, Rav Notik said, come to me for Shabbos. Come to my house for the meal. So the person parked his car and he got out. And he went to Rav Notik's house for Shabbos. And he was really enjoying himself, him and his wife, eating a cholent, enjoying the environment, the Torah, the Nigunim. And at one point he forgot where he was and he went to take out a cigarette. But then all of a sudden he remembered where he was and he put it away. So Rav Notik said he never saw those people again. And it was Shabbos, so he couldn't get their phone number. But he said that one thing he knows for sure, that they kept Shabbos for 2 hours. At least they kept Shabbos for 2 hours. So sometimes it's a bit harder to act this way with the people that are closest to us. Sometimes with the people that are closest to us, for whatever reason, it's harder. But that's where the challenge comes in. That's where the avoda comes in. To be able to act this way with the people in our lives that are closest to us. There's a man, Chassid, that he said when he was younger, he wanted to change the world. I'm going to change the world. And then, as he got a little bit older, he realized, it's not really working. I'm not really changing the world. You know what? I'm going to focus on changing my city. After a while, he saw that wasn't really working either, changing his city. So you know what? I'm going to work on changing my shul. So he worked on that. But after a while, he saw that wasn't really working either. So you know what? I'm going to work on changing my home, my environment. And after a while, he saw that wasn't working either. So now he was already an old man. He said, you know what? I'm going to work on changing myself. But now he was an old man. It wasn't so easy. And he realized, he said, I realize now, if I had done it the opposite way, if I had first started working on myself, I would have been much more effective and much more capable of affecting everybody else around me. That oftentimes, it's not so much that we have to change the people around us, but we have to change ourselves. We have to choose how we want to view the situation, how we want to look at things. Like the famous thing, when a person points at somebody else, there's 3 fingers pointing back at him. A lot of it is our vision, how we see the world around us. There was a couple that came to me for counseling. Actually, the man came, the woman came later. But he'd been having a decades-long argument with his wife, almost decades long. And so he was very well-spoken. He was very nice. He was very intelligent. I was trying to understand the issue. What's taking place? What's happening that they've been having this, decades-long argument that really was going on. So I asked him, how does the dialogue go? What happens? So he says, she would share what she feels, what's bothering her, and he would say, it's not true. It's not true what you're saying. It's not true. So she would, of course, feel rejected. She'd feel like put down. The argument would continue. So I explained to him, instead of just rejecting what she's saying, maybe consider what she's saying. Maybe validate. Maybe understand what she's saying. When people come together, they come from very different places. They have different upbringings, different experiences, different education, different friends, different mindset. Their inner soul makeup is different. They see the world different. So because one person expresses something in a certain way, it doesn't mean that what they're saying is not valid. It's as valid as what I'm saying too. But because he couldn't see it as valid, he just rejected her and went on and on. He came back a week later and I asked him, did you try and do what we talked about? Did you, instead of rejecting, you try and understand what she's saying? Listen to what she's saying, hear what she's saying, accept what she's saying. He said, I did, and it worked. It helped. It definitely worked. It helped a lot. So where does this come from? Where does this issue come from? This issue of being critical of others, of not accepting others. Because it would seem like, why not? Why not just accept the people around me? Why be critical of them? So the Baal Shem Tov says that we see the negative in others because we have the same negative within ourselves. If we see a bad meat in somebody else, it's because it's within us. It's reflecting to us. So a person can ask the question, of course, can't I just see somebody else for who they are? Why does it always have to be in me? So the Rebbe is a famous sikha where the Rebbe says that if what you see in somebody else, when you see the attribute in somebody else, you think to yourself, I want to help that person. Then it's a simon, it's a sign it's not you. But if you see in somebody else and you focus on that negative thing, you really see it, you focus on it, it's a sign it's in yourself. Like the story with Noah's 3 sons, with Ham, Yafes, and Shem. So when Noah was uncovered in his tent, what happened? Ham went in, and it says he saw his father was uncovered. And he went and told his 2 brothers. What did Shem and Yafes do? They put the garment over their shoulders. They walked backwards so they wouldn't see, and they covered their father. And the Rebbe explains that what was taking place here, Ham saw. He saw. Why did Ham see? Because he had the negative inside himself. That's why he saw, because it was in him. Shem and Yafes, as soon as they heard, they wanted to correct the situation. They wanted to help the situation. In other words, why they want? Because it wasn't in them. Oftentimes someone will say, that person is so manipulative. Another person will say, really, I didn't even know. Sometimes people don't see people as manipulative because they're not manipulative. They're not manipulative, so they don't see manipulation in other people. Another person, you might not be a selfish person. You don't see it in other people, but a person that has an attribute, it's very easy to see it in other people. So how does this connect to what we're talking about? Oftentimes, we're very self-critical of ourselves. We don't accept ourselves. We don't allow ourselves to make mistakes. We don't allow ourselves to be imperfect. I wrote a column one time. I focused the column on kind of the cognitive approach about thinking good and so forth, seeing the positive. So a person, he sent me an email from Miami, Florida, I think it was Miami. He said he's a cognitive therapist, and in his experience, he said, it's very hard to be able to just hold on to that, to a cognitive perspective. You always see things in a certain way. Always see the good. You need a very strong mind to be able to do that. So on the one hand, we can try and focus on the good in ourselves. For instance, let's say a person stands up and they give a speech, and something in the speech doesn't go exactly right. And after the speech, they sit down and they're kicking themselves. How could I have made that mistake? How could I have left out that line in the speech? So they might think to themselves, but you know what? 85% of the speech was great. 90% of the speech was great. And it makes them feel better because they're focusing on the good. But the other approach also works very well too. It's accepting the fact, accepting that I'm not perfect. And that's okay. I'm in a journey. I'm in a process of change. And it's okay. There was a book that came out in the 60s. It was a bestseller. It was called I'm Okay, You're Okay. Maybe some of you have heard of it. I'm Okay, You're Okay. It's written in a different style. If you have the book, you buy the book and you look at it. I'm not saying to buy the book, but if you happen to have the book and you look at it, so you see it's written in a different style. I think people had a little better attention span back then because it's written in a very dense style, very scholarly style. These days books are very kind of like sound bites, this, that. I think maybe it's a kind of ADD society, so that's the reason. But anyway, in that book, he has the hypothesis, the thesis, that at some point in a person's early life, they come up with this idea that I'm not okay and you are okay. And that's how they see the world. That everyone else is okay and I'm not okay. And then I think in a lot of ways, there's a lot of truth to that. And it's a big reason people tend to be critical of themselves. They feel they need to be perfect. They feel they need to be okay. And it's not okay to be not okay. A person has to be okay. What if a person does make a mistake? Or what if they have some issue that isn't like everybody else does? So are they supposed to beat themselves up about it? But if they say, you know what, it's okay. It's fine. This is who I am. It's part of a journey. And I can be like this. Now, it doesn't mean a person shouldn't strive to improve. As the Rebbe said, every living thing must grow. And the Rebbe was never satisfied with people staying in one place. There's a famous story when a person had a chiddush with the Rebbe, and he asked the person who was in a higher rung on the ladder. the person on the second rung of a 50 rung ladder, or the person on the 49th rung of a 50 rung ladder? The person said, of course, the person on the 49th rung of a 50 rung ladder. And the Rebbe said, no, it's all relative. It depends who's going upwards. If the guy on the second rung is continuing to go higher, but the guy on the 49th rung, even though he's close to the top, is no longer moving forward, then the guy on the second rung is at a higher level because he's still moving forward. So accepting ourselves doesn't mean being sedentary. It doesn't mean we're not going to try and grow and change. We still want to strive to grow, to improve ourselves, to accomplish. But at the same time, we're able to accept who we are and where we are as part of the journey. The story Rabbi Manis Friedman told, actually I'm about to tell at the end. So anyway, it's that idea, but when a person's able to accept who they are, then they're able to project that out onto the world around them. That what we have inside ourselves is generally how we view things around us. So if the person is self-accepting and understanding that they're on a journey, it's okay not to be perfect, they can see the same thing in their spouse and their children, their coworkers and so forth. Be more accepting. That's the idea of tikkun. There's a spiritual world called the world of tikkun, which is the world of Atzilus, and there's a higher world called the world of tohu. Now the world of tohu is a world where the lights are very, very big and the kelim are very, very small. So it was called the breaking of the vessels. But why was there a breaking of the vessels? Because each of the lights said, I'm me. I'm not going to coalesce with the other lights. I'm not going to unite with the other lights. I'm not going to accept the other lights. But the world of tikkun, the world of Atzilus, you have the different lights coalescing with each other. You have the spheros, you have chesed and gevura. You have gevura and chesed. Because there was this, so to speak, acceptance, this bittul, this ability to get along with each other. But that acceptance breeds that ability to get along with other people. Now, what about change? What about changing your spouse? It's one thing to say, great, you know what, wonderful, I'm going to accept my spouse, wonderful. But there's no getting away from the fact that there's things about our spouse that can be hard, and then we want them to change. So what about that? You know, I can accept all day long, but what about change? Maybe I should say to them sometimes, you know, maybe about changing certain things. Oftentimes, when we are kind of demanding of our spouse to make a certain change, the spouse feels criticized and tends to become defensive. And they tend to almost not be open to change because they feel like the love is dependent on them making this change. And so to speak, what? You love me more if I'll change? And if I don't, you won't love me as much? Your love is dependent on whether or not I'm going to make this change or I'm not going to make this change? And the person gets defensive. So what can a spouse do? What can a spouse do? So again, acceptance. If we're able to accept the person where they're holding, that creates the environment where change can take place. Oftentimes, we block change from taking place, but the simplicity of just saying, you're my spouse, and I accept you as you are, people generally want to change. They have an inner desire to grow, to move forward, but they need that environment where that can take place. You know, for instance, education, chinuch. There's two approaches. One way is you tell a kid to stop doing what they're doing, and the kid says, okay. He agrees to stop doing what he's doing. But inside, he didn't really make that internal change. He's still who he is. But another approach is raising the child up, showing him he's much greater than that. And that will inspire him to not want to do that negative thing. So too, accepting our spouse is raising them up. They feel better, they feel good, they feel accepted, and that can create the environment for change. There was a couple that came to me for counseling, and I went in the same direction with them because this is usually the direction I tend to take with people. And I worked for a lot of sessions with the husband because it wasn't natural for him to be in this way. He wasn't brought up, he wasn't accustomed to this way of approaching his wife. I explained to him the benefit of it. So one day his wife says to me, she says, you know what? One day I was very emotional. I was expressing myself to my husband. And he sat there and he understood me. He empathized with me and he accepted me. He just listened to me. And she said it was better than diamonds and gold. That's what she said. It was more healing, more therapeutic than diamonds and gold. It creates a certain positive energy within a couple, this acceptance. It creates such an amount of positive energy, it can almost bring the person to a place of the things that bother them, just stop bothering them. Even if the things don't go away, like we said at the beginning, the things stay the same, but they just don't bother the person anymore because he sees things in a different light, more to the aspect of chesed, as opposed to gavur and din. Communication. Communication is a big thing in marriage counseling. People teach different techniques for communication. But with this approach, oftentimes, you don't really need even the communication to fix problems because that acceptance, just a lot of times the things that are issues just kind of vanish. They just kind of go away. Often communication is used to kind of point out what the person's doing wrong and can even kind of create conflict sometimes. I'm not saying I'm opposed to communication. I'm not saying that at all. There's a time and a place for everything. But oftentimes, there's other ways, more positive ways of kind of fixing things where communication techniques don't need to come into play. Before the two souls come down into the world, so they're two half souls. But then when they get married, they become one complete soul. However, the issue can be is that even though once they come down to the world and united through marriage, this unity might be concealed. They might not feel this unity in their life. They might say, okay, I know theoretically that we're now united, we're one soul, but I don't feel it. I don't feel that connection to my spouse. I don't feel it. Because in life, as we know from learning, some things can be concealed and some things can be revealed. By giving and accepting our spouse, that we make a kli, we make a vessel for that connection to become revealed. That blessing of Hashem has a place to dwell in our life. And we feel a true connection to the person. I know we have to finish up soon, so I just want to cover a couple more points because I know we're getting towards the end. And I'll go through them a bit quickly. A person might say, listen, I'm not at that level. I'm not there yet, okay? I can't just accept, I'm not there. So what can they do? They can weigh the positive versus the negative. They can say, listen, if I act in this way, if I act in this way, so therefore, I'm sorry, somebody just wrote me a note which kind of distracted me, I apologize. If I act in this way, so things will be better. My wife will be happy with me and things will be better. And if I don't, things won't be as good. So there is a benefit to that. Even though it's maybe not totally altruistic, the person might be giving from the point of view of what they're going to receive. But the Alter Rebbe explains in the Kuti Torah that we have to start from somewhere. We have to start. He talks about in terms of Avodas Hashem. A person might daven because they want to come close to Hashem, because they want to feel that bliss. Okay, they're doing it because they want to receive. The Alter Rebbe says we have to start somewhere. So we have to start somewhere. So in this case also, even though a person might not be totally altruistic in their giving, but by giving, so that will bring them to be able to give in more altruistic way. Okay, one more thing and then we'll move to conclusion. But it's important to talk about this because we're in this parsha, the Akedah. The Akedah was when Avram almost sacrificed Yitzhak and Har-Moriah. So if you notice, after the Akedah, what does the Torah tell us? It tells us genealogy of Nahor Avram's brother, all the way down until the birth of Rivka, which is Yitzhak's future wife. So you wonder to yourself, we were in the suspense. We were in the suspense of the Akedah. And now all of a sudden we're moving to kind of like genealogy. Why? Why does the Torah make this transition? Because the Torah wants to tell us something. By moving from the sacrifice of the Akedah to the transition of the genealogy leading up to Rivka, Yitzhak's future wife being born, the Torah is telling us that to have a successful marriage, there needs to be sacrifice. There needs to be sacrifice. But what is that sacrifice? That sacrifice is setting ourselves aside, setting the me receiving, me getting what I want aside, and giving to the other person. Why? Because they're my spouse. Because I care for them and I want to give to them. Ahava is the root of Ahava, Hav, is connected to the word giving. A lot of people think, I'll fall in love. It's that feeling. But that feeling is something I'm receiving. It's not something I'm receiving. And what happens when that feeling goes away? So now I fall out of love. But love is not something that just happens. Love is something that's nurtured, something that's created through giving. The giving creates the connection. The more a person gives, the more connected they feel, the more invested they feel, and the more united they feel with their spouse. So I think we'll stop here because it's getting late. But if anybody has any questions, as Rabbi Goldberg said, I'm happy to do my best to try and answer.
Awesome. Thank you, Rabbi Schmidt, very, very much. You were very inspiring. And anyone that has any questions, of course, they're welcome to email you if people want to follow up with you. I'm sure it will be a great opportunity. And I have to tell you that the bringing peace in the home, Shalom Bayit, is perhaps the greatest shlichut that there is around. It's a huge zchut for you. And next week, as you mentioned, we're going to talk about the first shidduch. So please look forward to my 2-minute video before Shabbos next week. It's going to be a special one all about shidduchim. I want to thank very much Raya and Mordechai for hosting this broadcast of this great lecture through Zoom and Facebook Live. Bezrat Hashem, afterwards we'll be able to see anybody that wants to see this lecture will be able to see it again on Facebook. Bezrat Hashem, we'll repost it, so it'll be edited properly. And a couple of questions that I would like to present to you, please, if I may. Let's start with one, and maybe we'll leave it to 1 or 2 or 3 questions. But let's start with one question, please. Being now that excuse me, please, that now we're unfortunately during the time of the coronavirus, and naturally people are home more. Unfortunately, people have been left off jobs. And the joke in Israel goes that the woman called up the Misrad B'riyut and she said, "My husband has been in bidud for 2 weeks now. Can you please extend the 2 weeks?" But in any case, I imagine that there have been more of these challenges as far as Shalom Bayit. And can you please tell us in short any maybe tips or tools that people can use during this challenging time specifically?
Right. You're right what you say. It is a challenging time. And there have been some more issues with Shalom Bayit between spouses, also between children and parents and siblings and so forth. But as Rav Yitzhak Arad from the Rechavia says, that a couple should really enjoy being together. Enjoy being together. So this time at home, oftentimes we're so busy with work and this, and a lot of people I speak to, they don't really take the time to spend time with their spouse. So it's an opportunity to, in the evening, sit outside, have a cup of tea together, maybe even in the morning, have a cup of coffee together, to take the opportunity to spend a little more time with each other, getting to know each other. Even though a couple might be married 30 years, there's still what to get to know. So a person can look at it from that perspective. It's a time to have a chance to spend a bit more time together.
That's a great point. That's very nice. You remind me on a Shaliach level. Next week is supposed to be the Kinus HaShluchim. Halavai Mashiach should come. We should be there in person. But as far as it seems now, it's pretty much going to be a Zoom Kinus. But getting to the point, I once heard that the Rebbe told Rabbi Gershon Mendel Gorelik and his Rebbitzin, Mrs. Basi Gorelik, Hashem should give Rabbi Gorelik a refuah shalema, that they should learn every day. I think it was the chitat of the day together. In other words, it's not just about spending time together, which is very important, but also learning together. And also, when one of the Rebbe's doctors in 1977, after the Rebbe suffered, unfortunately, a massive heart attack, and the doctors spent a lot of time with the Rebbe, and one of the doctors asked the Rebbe, I think it was Rabbi Tischholz, he tells over in the video, what is the most meaningful part of your day? And he said, the half hour that I sit with my wife with a tea when I come home, and the Rebbe sometimes came home in the wee hours of the morning. But every single day, the Rebbe spent a certain amount of time with the Rebbe, and spending time that's a great point. Thank you very much. Just one more question, if I may. There are quite a few people that are in our community, and I'm sure beyond, and I'm not sure exactly who's on the Zoom and Facebook right now, but it's very possible that I hear the question all the time, and I think this is a very relevant question. And that is that there are a lot of people that are looking for a shidduch and are not yet in a marriage relationship. And I think one of the things that it's possible that can be, at least as far as nature is concerned, that are withholding is because people they know that these different challenges can come up, and it's almost like a psychological, forgetting my English here, tat-muda, almost like unknowledgeable, with under the surface, feeling that who knows what can come up, and maybe it's scary to go into such a relationship of anyone, even without speaking about someone specific. So how is it possible? I know this might be a loaded question, but how is it possible, at least in a couple of points, to calm someone down and to say, you know what, you're not the first person getting married, and you're not the last person to get married, and it's possible, as you say, to understand your spouse, to understand yourself, and to be able to come to terms and lead a happy life for many happy years.
Right. There is that fear. Some people, they're afraid to get married because of what could happen, what could take place. They've seen different stories and so forth and experienced different things, and they're afraid of that. But whatever happens to us in life, we have the emunah, the belief that it's from Hashem. That any situation we're put in, we're put there for a reason. And that's exactly where we're supposed to be. And it's for something that we have to work on. It's for our good. So that emunah can help us to feel more calm going into a situation, knowing that everything is from Hashem, nothing is random, nothing is coincidence, everything is exactly how it's supposed to be. The one thing I will say about that is oftentimes people, in terms of marriage and looking for a shidduch, what can be helpful, is oftentimes people, they don't find what they're looking for because they're looking for something that might be a little bit unrealistic too. So if a person can make a list, perhaps, of the things that are important to them, like for instance, having a Shabbos home, having children, having guests, and they get excited about these things that are meaningful to them, then many more people will become attractive to them, because they won't just be looking for that kind of spark, but they'll be looking for somebody that has these different desires also, and they'll find that the pool of potential candidates becomes much bigger. Yafeh.
Thank you very much once again, Rabbi Schmidt. You should have lots of atzlacha in your work as a marriage counselor and in your work as a Shaliach in Ramat Beit Shemesh Aleph. And Bezrat Hashem, we look forward to seeing you over here in person at Chabad and Rechavia Nachlaot, and lots of atzlacha. Be well. Thank you everybody so much for joining us. This is great.
Thank you very much. Thank you.